All right, we're back with part 2 of the sculptor's funeral. So here's a question. How does somebody, a world famous sculptor, artist like Harvey Merrick, how does he spring from a place like this, right? How does he spring from a small town of small-minded people? Now, I think the only answer the story offers is that he got some sensitivity from his father. He certainly didn't get it from his mother. She is a brutish, melodramatic, self-centered, abusive woman, right? Abusive to the mulatto servant, that's part black, part white servant that they have. It's ugly. The sculptor's friend, the Bostonian. As Stevens turned away and closed his eyes with a shudder of unutterable repulsion. He cannot believe that Harvey Merrick came from this. He looked painfully about over the clover green Brussels, that's carpet, the fat plush upholstery among the hand-painted china plaques and panels and vases, for some mark, for something that might once conceivably have belonged to Harvey Merrick. It was not till he recognized his friend in the crayon portrait of a little boy in kilts and curls hanging above the piano that he felt willing to let any of these people approach the coffin. Stevens can't even, Stevens, like, somehow in his mind he can't conceive of that he's in the right place, that these people are in any way associated with the Harvey Merrick that he knew and loved and adored in one fashion or another. And until he sees his a little portrait of him on the wall, forget it. You know, he's like, I'm not even letting these people near. So that at least confirms that he's in the right town, in the right house. But the point is bigger than that. The point is that he's like, how does someone like Harvey Merrick come from this? That's a good question, right? It's of course kind of snobbish. Stevens is thinking about it. Stevens is very observant. I like Stevens. He's a little bit of a snob, you know, sort of snooty Easterner going out to the Midwest. Maybe I'm the same way. I don't know. But he's very devoted to his teacher. Remember that. He's very, very devoted to his mentor, his teacher. Don't ever forget that, people. If you ever accompany my body somewhere, you know, make sure you do it like Stevens here. So the people in the small town here, and they have no appreciation for art. They have no appreciation of him as an artist. Here's something that Phelps, one of the scoundrels in town. Phelps and the rest of them are coming back to set up with Harv, ain't they? I should have looked this ritual up. There is a ritual of staying up with the body awake. Of course, the ritual started with the usefulness of seeing making sure the person was dead before you buried him. He's very likely embalmed and he's already come from the east, so we know he's dead. But it's the ritual of sitting up with the body to make sure the person's well dead, completely dead, not just half dead, before you bury them. He was a good boy, Jim. Always had a good boy. He was as gentle as a child and the kindest of them all. Only we didn't, none of us, ever understand him. This is actually the dad talking. The tears trickled slowly down his beard and dropped upon the sculptor's coat. Wait a minute. Yes, that's the father. That's the father before the scoundrels come back. And you see how the father was very attached to the son, and how the father, you know, mortgaged the farms and sacrificed really his life, his chances maybe to get out of town, to live at least a better life in his town, so his son could. And you see how he's particularly sincerely broken up that his son has died at the age of 40. The mother does not seem sincerely broken up. The mother seems to be the way Cather writes this, which is marvelous if you didn't notice. The way Cather writes this, the mother is very much having a dramatic moment for herself, right? She's making her son's death about her and not about the death of her son, right? The grating sound made by the casket as it was drawn from the hearse was answered by a scream from the house. The front door was wrenched open, and a tall, corpulent woman rushed out bareheaded into the snow, flung herself upon the coffin, shrieking, "My boy, my boy, and this is how you've come home to me." So very melodramatic. This is in throwing herself sort of on the crucifying herself. This is how you've come home to me. Like, you abandoned me and now you come home only when you're dead. Me, it's all about me. The dad is not like that. The dad is sincerely moved to tears, and it's very, very sad. The daughter is dressed in black. She has a mourning comb. You have a feeling, I think Cather puts in here, the mulatto servant, who certainly seems ill-treated and would have been discriminated against because she's part black, which means you might as well be all black throughout most of American history. And I think she is broken up because she and Harvey were probably somewhat kindred spirits. They were both sort of didn't fit in. Neither of them fit in to this town, to this society. Yeah, very good. Good stuff. Good stuff, people. Good stuff. Yeah, the Merricks took her out of the poorhouse years ago. And if she hadn't been so loyal to them, she would tell stories. So you have this feeling that there's a lot of bad stuff going on in this family. And it's not coming from the dad either. There's a lot of bad family dynamics here. It's not good. Some of the language is just funny. This is Stevens, the Bostonian, the student, the special friend. He was wonderful, said Stevens slowly. Wonderful, but until tonight, I never knew how wonderful. Now, answer me this. Why, seeing where Harvey Merrick came from, how has that made Stevens think him even more wonderful? He's dead. How can you think he's more wonderful? He hasn't discovered another sculpture that he did. Well, if you're a world-famous sculptor, and let's say your parents were wealthy, also sculptors, loving, nurtured your talent, well, I would still think well of that person, but come on, they had all the advantages on their side, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when a sensitive, marvelous sculptor artist comes out of this, and Stevens sees what he came out of, right? It's like one thing for a beautiful flower to grow in luscious, gorgeous dirt, but for a beautiful flower to grow in gravel, you admire the flower all the more for where it came from. He was wonderful, wonderful, but until tonight, I have never known how wonderful. That is the true and eternal wonder of it anyway, that it came even from such a dung heap as this, the lawyer cried. That's Jim Laird, the lawyer who, we talked about him. Sweeping gesture, which seemed to indicate much more than the four walls. That he came out of a dung heap like this town and out of these horrid people. So, just because I said how much I liked this story and how I missed it, it doesn't mean I agree with everything Cather says here. She's pretty hard on this small town and these people. She's not making a good case for small town life here. And I love small town life, right? But I also know the scoundrels of small town life. And they're out there and they're not killing anybody, but they're looking out for themselves, not so much their community. Most small town people I know are looking out for their community. And in that regard, looking out for themselves. Not looking out for themselves first. You look out for your community first, and then the community that you are a part of takes care of each other. That's not what's going on here. So Cather's given a pretty dark portrait of a Midwestern small town. Now, let's not get carried away. I know what you're all thinking. I can read your minds out there. I know what you're all thinking. Well, she's writing about her own life. Well, yes, but don't get carried away with what's called autobiographical criticism. Don't get carried away with this business of, oh, well, she's a writer from a Midwestern town who left to the big city, Lincoln, and then, to Pennsylvania and more the East Coast, where, the more elite old money people live here on the East Coast and old universities and such. And, she goes back to visit the small town once in a while, as Willa Cather did. I slept in her bedroom. No, that doesn't mean Willa Cather, her parents were, this does not mean that Willa Cather thought little of Red Cloud or her mother or anything like that, okay? So authors put parts of their life into stories all the time, and sometimes, and this is why you have to study biographies carefully if you're going to go down this autobiographical criticism route, that's looking at literature in light of the author's life. You have to know your stuff, right? And you have to know what an author just kind of draws from as far as plot and experience, and what really might be the true person, the author, in there, right? Some authors are more deeply autobiographical, some just draw upon life circumstances. But so there's a certain level of autobiography here in this story. I'll tell you, you go to Red Cloud today, they love Willa Cather. She is almost the only thing going on there. A lot of empty storefronts. You think some of the towns and villages around here are a little depressed from what they used to be 100 years ago. They are. They all are. The activity that used to be there. Go to the Midwest. It's sad. I drove through towns out there, and I like small towns, and I looked around and I thought this place should be bulldozed. I mean, the place was almost empty. The few people there were sad. It was like ghosts. It was like almost like a 20th century ghost town. So go to the Midwest. Don't go twice. Once is enough. He's referred to as an oyster, which means always closed. But what grows inside of an oyster? A pearl, right? A pearl comes out of an oyster, but their oysters are closed. And that's the sense that when this artist was very closed. Stevens understood now the real tragedy of his master's life. Neither love nor wine, as many had conjectured, but a blow which had fallen earlier and cut deeper than these could have done, a shame not his, and yet so unescapably his, to hide in his heart from his very boyhood, and without the frontier warfare, the yearning of a boy cast ashore upon a desert of newness and ugliness and sordidness, for all that is chastened and old and noble with traditions. The tragedy was not wine. It was not, so you have a feeling that he did, he did like wine, and maybe he drank too much, and there was a certain tragedy to his adult life, which we don't know a lot about. And Stevens is saying, now I see it. It's what he came out of, and what he had to succeed despite of. So, let's see. Let's end part 2 here, and then we'll move into part 3, and we'll finish up Sculptor's funeral.